Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Lunch with a Leader. It is an honor to have you.
Well, Mike, thank you. It's an honor for me. And again, I just appreciate the opportunity to share and so appreciative of you and your ministry and what you do in order to inspire and encourage those of us that are walking that daily walk. And I just want you to know how important your lunch with the leader has been. Lunch with the leader has just been for me and how inspiring it is. And I'm so thankful that Josh shared that with me. It's been a great ministry for me to be able to observe via YouTube, which is just
Yeah.
awesome.
You are so awesome. I appreciate that. Well, we've got a lot of things we love in common. And I think one of our common loves is sports. We both love just all athletics, the game of sports. Did you ever dream when you were a little boy growing up in Kentucky that you would still be in sports today? Was that a goal of yours growing up?
Well, Mike, first of all, was deeply blessed to have two wonderful Christian parents, and Little League was a vital part of my life growing up. And my father was a Little League coach, and all of the guys I grew up with, we all played against each other or with each other, and so sports was important.
Mm.
It was valued. I often tell my mother, who is still living today, Mom, you definitely were a rose among all the many thorns with my brother and I and Dad because we love sports so much. And she said it was always fun to go and to participate. But to answer your question, growing up, I always wanted to coach.
Mm, mm.
My brother and I both, and my brother's 7 years older than I, and he's a Hall of Fame coach in Kentucky in basketball. And so he had a great career and whatever, working with young men and young women, but to say that at this point in my life, would I still be engaged in the curriculum of sport? The answer is no. I never envisioned it, and sometimes I think, Mike, for me anyway, it was not. Maybe it wasn't the path I chose. The path chose me,
That's good.
and I look at that in the sense that going in, getting a degree in college, I went the business education route because I was afraid I might not like education, teaching and coaching. I was afraid, and so I felt like that gave me a kind of a back door if I didn't like it to be able to springboard into something else. And to answer that question, after year one at a little single A school there in Central Kentucky at Paris High School, I knew exactly what I was doing, and my love was that passion. And at the age of 22, I was a head baseball coach and wondering, what am I doing? But it was great. And I was coaching kids that were 17 and 18, and I mean, but I look back at those young men, and I'm still in touch with them today. And it's just some of the things I think of the influence that I had on them and maybe a pivotal point in their life. And I know now today that it was a blessing because they blessed me, and in turn, I blessed them.
You lead a massive organization now as an executive director. We'll get into in a few minutes. What are skills that you learned growing up playing little league, playing high school sports that you still use every day? What were some of those intangibles you may have picked up from a coach or you may have picked up from a teammate that you go, man, here I am today going into an office working with thousands and thousands and thousands of schools across the country in athletics? What are some of those values and skills that you picked up that are still in use in your life today?
Well, I think for the most part, discipline is a two-way street,
Mm.
and there's a process for everything. And I think sometimes when we get into the work, sometimes the work engages us to the point to where we forget the fundamentals. And I
Mm.
don't think we can ever forget the fundamentals, whatever sport that is or whatever you're doing in life. There's fundamentals to the fact of being a good father, to being a good husband, to being a good person, period. And so I think for me, some of my takeaways in my early life, especially playing Little League with some of my dearest friends, was the fact that, first of all, you have to practice.
Mm.
You
Mm.
have to pray. You have to put forth the work. And if you put forth the work, it doesn't guarantee success, but it does guarantee the fact that you do feel a little bit better, maybe whenever the success doesn't come to your expectations. I kind of pride myself in the fact when I get the opportunity to speak, I tell everyone I am a true product of education-based athletics
Mm,
because I said, number one, I never won a championship.
mm,
And it's not about the championships. It's about the influence that my coaches
that's
and my
right.
individuals had in me that put in me, that instilled in me a spirit of that process, that discipline, that love for the game. And they influenced me in such a manner that it would have been wrong for me to even win a championship because the simple fact is, I think I learned so much more. So education-based athletics is so much more than just championships. And I think sometimes we lose our focus.
Mm,
And so I try to make it a point to be reminded of the fact that I can remember as a little league player, you know, your gloves got to be down. Your hands have to be out in front.
yep.
And, you can't be afraid of the ball. And those little things as you start to replay life and whatever. And so as adults, it's no different.
Mm,
I come into the office every morning. I'm usually in the office about 6:30, 6:45. And I want to be here because number one, that's my time to kind of get ready for the day. I do a little devotion here and do some things and whatever. And then at that point, I try to set my mind and my heart toward service,
mm,
toward the fact of what I've been called to do. So again, as I said earlier, if you would have said, Phil, 10 years ago, if you just said, Phil, you'll be in Indianapolis, Indiana, and you'll be leading the NIAAA, and you'll be working with thousands of athletic administrators on a daily basis, I would have probably kind of laughed. And I think when I say I would have laughed, I would have thought, you know, you really think that of me. And so I think when I say the path, and I talk about the path, and I use that a lot of times when I get the opportunity to speak to young people, be patient with the
mm,
path. Mike,
mm,
I interviewed, if you look at my career structure, primarily I was a teacher and coach my first 9 years. My next 10 years, I was an assistant principal athletic director. And I was just as happy as a lark. And my
mm,
superintendent walked in and said, "Hey, we're going to move you to central office." And I said, "Do what?" And he said, "Phil, we need you in central office. I want you to be our director of operations." And I said, "I'm not leaving anywhere unless it involves athletics." And to my superintendent's credit, he said, "I wouldn't have it any other way."
mm,
He said,
mm,
"You're engaged in that. That's your passion." And he said, "Absolutely. You still oversee athletics for our whole district." And so with that, serving in that capacity, Mike, at the district level for my last 11 years, I had an opportunity to experience something that maybe, I started thinking about maybe being a school superintendent. And I started taking my training there, which I'd already had my degree and obtained my superintendency to be a superintendent in the state of Kentucky. But I interviewed Mike for 13 superintendent's jobs. And that was over a 6-year period. I interviewed for 13 superintendent's jobs. And in 6 of those, I was a finalist.
mm,
And as a finalist, it comes down to you might have to go back for another interview, and you might have to even attend a community forum or something or whatever. And in all of those, I really felt like I did really well. Usually my wife, Paula, would accompany me. But I was always told, Phil, you did a great job. You had a great interview. But at this time, we're going a different direction. And then in 2012, the school district where I had spent most of my career, 28 of my 30 years primarily, I'd spent, the superintendent's position came open, and I was encouraged to apply for it. And I didn't get it. The matter of fact, they hired someone else on a 3-2 vote, and that was okay. I was okay with that. I was a little disappointed because I felt like that, I'd provided a service, been there, committed to
yep.
our community. And so they bring in another person. And I think a lot of people really felt like that I would leave. And Paula and I were so engaged in our church, in our community. And we just decided hey, we're going to see what happens. And so the other gentleman comes in as the superintendent, and I think people didn't feel like we could work together. And ultimately, we ended up being able to work together. He never asked me to do anything that I felt like was unethical, but he was in basically turmoil with our board from the time he got there until the time basically they let him go. And so they let him go, Mike. And when they let him go on January the 2nd of primarily 2014, they kind of put me in the interim position there for a while. And so I was serving in that capacity. And I had a couple of board members tell me, just stay the course, da, da, da. And so I really felt like at that time, kind of God was saying, hey, maybe you're going to be a superintendent. Yep. And you're going to be a superintendent here. I had a vision for you. I had a dream for you. This was the path. It's kind of like I can remember in our Sunday school class with us studying, the prayer of Jabez, enlarge my territory and bless me and whatever. And I really felt like that maybe the opportunity had presented itself for me to do that in our community. Ultimately, what happened is the board kind of asked me to do some things that I wasn't comfortable with doing as far as treating people. And ultimately, they went a different direction. And then in May, they abolished my position. And so at that point, here I am with 30 years in, and my wife, who is a reading specialist in our school district, she still has another year primarily to meet her retirement requirements. And so at that point, Mike, I made the decision that I was going to retire. And I was currently at that time serving as the executive director for the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association. So through all of this, Mike, I guess my saving grace is I always had my athletic friends, my ADs, coaches, and I'm not bragging, but I'm the only individual in the state of Kentucky that has ever served as president of the Kentucky High School Coaches Association and president of the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association. And so anyway, to make a long story short, Mike, just to share with you where God took me, I was served that year. I call it a gap year because I knew, number one, I was 53 and I knew, man, I still want to work and I still have a passion. And my wife would go to work every morning and I would go to the gym and I would work out and I'd listen to gospel music on my headphones and I'd pray while I was working out and running and whatever. And then I was serving the AD Association and I would go to different meetings and meet with people about that and co-ops there in the state of Kentucky. And so around the February board meeting here in Indianapolis, a friend called me and he said, "Have you heard the news?" And I said, "What news is that?" And they said, "Well," said the gentleman, Bruce Whitehead, who's been the executive director, has retired and they've elevated Mike Blackburn as his replacement. And they're going to be posting the associate executive director's position. And I said, "Wow, I didn't realize Bruce was thinking about that." They said, "No, Phil, we didn't call for that. We called to tell you, you need to apply for the job." And I said, "Well, thank you for thinking of me. I deeply appreciate that, but I don't think you would have to live there. And I don't think Paula would have any interest in moving there." So Mike, tell God, I guess, your plans, and then he's going to show you pretty much what your plans are. Paula and I, through prayer and whatever, I decided to apply for it. And so on February the 4th of 2016, after going through about a 8-month process of interviewing and submitting documentations, I was offered the associate executive director's position for the NIAAA. And I got to be honest. To this day, when I drive in, I still say, "Lord, you have blessed me so much more abundantly than I ever asked for." And so with that, I got to serve with a great Christian leader, Mike Blackburn. And we worked together for 6 years. And then it's ironic, February seems to be kind of my month, I guess, or my happy month. But on February of 22, Mike calls me down to the office and he said, "Well, I just want you to know today I'm submitting my letter of retirement. And I'm like, huh? What? And he said, yeah, I just want you to know. And so, Mike, I go to work on a Saturday morning. Our board is in from all over the United States. We're meeting and then we're having basically our winter meeting. And the board, after Mike submits his his letter of retirement, the leadership asked us to stand out. The board members asked us to stand out. And then a few minutes later, one of the officers came down and said, we'd like to meet with you. And I go down and they asked me if I have interest in the position. And I said, absolutely. I do. I still feel like I have a passion to serve. And they elevated me that day. So, Paul and I often laugh, Mike. I go home on that day after we've had that meetings and I walk in and Paula said, well, how was your day? I said, oh, it's great. I said, oh, by the way, I was named executive director today of the NIAAA.
Oh my goodness.
And so, Mike, that journey, it's got God all over it.
Yeah.
And so with that, it just, you go from the fact of I was coaching and teaching and loving it. And a principal called me in and said, I'd like for you to be our athletic director next year and our assistant principal. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. He said, no, we need you here. The team needs you here.
Yep.
And as my wife always used to tell me, she said, Phil, if they say the team needs you somewhere, you're a team guy. You're always going.
That's right. That's right.
And so, so when I look back and I reflect back and I think about that journey, first of all, again, as I've already mentioned, the prayer of Jabez in the sense that, I can remember going through the Sunday school and us studying that. And I prayed to enlarge my territory, but Mike, I was thinking my territory was, the
right.
bluegrass state.
Yep.
It was Kentucky. I wasn't thinking about, it's just like, to this day, I still stand amazed. And I just returned from traveling. I was on the road for 19 out of 21 days, and I attended 8 state conferences. And I got to be with the most awesome people, the athletic directors who are working with they're coaching our coaches, they're encouraging our children, and just I got to tell you, I come off of that, and my only prayer during that was, Lord, just going to be going in through a lot of airports and planes. Just keep me healthy so I can get through this stretch. And it's just been great. And to be here and to be in this chair, first of all, I don't take it lightly. I want you to know through a lot of people, through prayer and believing in me, I sit here today. Yeah.
It's so funny because it would have been so easy in that journey, Phil, for you to go, man, these dead ends, these detours, these delays. I thought I was supposed to be a superintendent. I thought I was supposed to do this. And while we are experiencing all these things, God's preparing a way that is so much better. What would you tell somebody listening today that may be in that season of delay? They've got a job that they've got on the horizon that they feel like they're supposed to have. They've got a career path laid out and it's not a straight line. It's not going there like they want it to. Looking back in the rearview mirror of God's faithfulness to you, what encouragement would you give them today?
I think, first of all, I would tell anyone, first of all, you have to trust and obey. And you have to trust and obey in the sense that you got to understand that it's not about you. If you are a complete servant of Jesus and you want to serve how he wants you to serve, then at that point you're submissive to the fact of what he wants you to do. And through, there were times Paul and I would make and I mentioned my wife, she's my rock. We've been married 38 years and we were high school sweethearts, but through the times of prayer and supplication and the fact of just on potential decisions or whatever, we would always, you got to seek his will.
That's right.
And so, sometimes I think it gets tough when we get through the valley and we want to, and it's very fair and it's very normal. We question, where are you, God? It's human nature for us to say, I've been here. I've done this. I've done this. I've followed your, da da
Yep.
da. But you know what, God? I mean, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the fact that you have a plan for me. And I think through that, if we stay the course, and it goes back to what I said about Little League, trust the
That's
process,
right.
trust the discipline that's involved in that. And as you said, Mike, just when you talk about James and how he tells us to persevere, he's preparing something better.
Mm,
And and here's the thing about it is, even if he's not, what's better in the end is the victory that we have.
that's good.
And so, I meant I think about that, and I think about all the people. And I went through a period of when I came up here, I took note cards, and I wanted to make sure that people knew how much I appreciated people that would tell me, especially after what I'd gone through there in my community after I'd served so long, that it said, "I'm praying for you."
Mm,
And I took it to a point, I don't take that lightly. If I tell someone I'm going to pray for them, I write that down.
that's right.
And I try to keep that in my prayer diary to the point to where I know that I'm lifting individuals up. And really, I may not know what their need is, but he does.
That's right. When you say the phrase, and I love this phrase, you've said it a couple of times today, I've heard you say it before, bloom where you're planted. You've got a guy, a young lady, they're beginning of their career. Maybe they're in their athletic world, maybe they're in the business world, maybe they're in the education world, wherever they're at. When you say bloom where you're planted, what do you mean, and what significance does that have to you when you see someone, you're hiring a position, you are looking for someone to encourage about another position somewhere. When you see someone who's blooming where they're planted, what does that mean, and what does that look like?
Well, I think for me, what it means is the fact that you're taking advantage of the opportunity
Mm,
that is there in front of you. And too many times, I think that individuals sometimes you start stepping on the ladder before they ever even set the ladder up.
that's right.
And
So
the
true.
ladder, if you want to climb the ladder of success, first of all, it goes back to the discipline and the fact of some things you have to have in place before you will ever obtain success. And understand success is in the end.
Mm,
And we're going to go through the peaks and valleys of life. But I think when I say talk about bloom where you're planted, I mean, while you're there for a reason.
that's right.
You are in that position for that reason, and you need to take advantage of it. And opportunities that are presented itself there, as you already have alluded to, will grow you for maybe something that's greater down the road. And,
Mm,
and I think I'm a better leader today because of things that have happened to me. I think I'm a little bit more uh, passionate and compassionate in the sense of understanding what someone else could be going through. The old adage is, we don't know what people are going through until we've walked a mile in their shoes.
yep.
And so, to me, too many individuals today they don't want to start at the bottom of the ladder. They want to already ascend to the top. And there's a process that helps that maturation and that growth as you get to the top that prepares you for that.
That's right. So you think about this young 22-year-old coach at Paris High School. Now, a gentleman years later as an executive director of an organization. Why do you think God used that seasoning time of that first job when you were probably the last one out every night? You were learning things on the fly that you didn't know. You're a 22-year-old coaching 17 and 18 years olds. You're trying to figure out a practice plan. You're trying to figure out buses. You're trying to figure out how to deal with parents that were just they're the same age as your parents. How did God use that blooming time there at Paris High School to prepare you for now?
Well, first of all, if you know anything about Paris High School in Paris, Kentucky, it's a single A school
Mm,
and it's a tradition-rich academic school. And so, Mike, in 1985, when I first started teaching, I had to wear a tie to school every day. It was mandatory. There were certain expectations that the teachers were required to do. And so I look back to that discipline. So for me, as I started my journey into that educational world, it was just confirmation of everything that I had been taught my whole life by my parents. My father served in Korea. He was a hard worker. He was basically a television lineman
mm.
for 33 years. He climbed poles. As he got older, he always used to laugh about the fact that they were worried about him climbing the poles, so they bought him a bucket truck. And but he loved sports. He kept
Mm.
the clock at my local high school for 35 years.
Wow.
And so he loved sports. He loved being around it. And he loved his two boys as they were engaged in that
Mm.
sport, just as my mother did. But I, for me, my first job was a confirmation of everything growing up that had been taught to me.
That's so good.
And so I wanted, as I started that journey, I wanted to share, I wanted to share that with the young people I was working with. But I think back to that, and Paula and I often we just smile when we talk about Paris. We just smile, and we think back to the fact that what a journey and how
Mm.
great it was to get our start there, and to be engaged in a school so academic and athletic rich. They were a football powerhouse in Class A in the state of Kentucky, and I got to work with some of the greatest people that are still colleagues to this day or friends. And you know, it, Mike, I don't know how to say it other than the fact that I just feel like that path, as I told you about, I would have never, when I graduated from Eastern Kentucky University with a degree in business education, and I graduated in December, so I would have never envisioned teaching at Paris. Matter of fact, Mike, I would have never made an application for Paris.
Mm.
And here's what happened. At Eastern, I agreed to put my name in career placement. And so I got out when I graduated in December. I was going to just substitute for the rest of the year to kind of make some money because Paul and I were planning on getting married and whatever. And I'm driving out of my driveway at home. I've moved back home, and my mother comes running out. And this is before cell phones. And she says, Phil, she said, there's a Mr. Chumley on the phone that wants to talk to you from Paris High School. And I go in and take the phone, and he said, Phil, he said, this is Ron Chumley. I'm the superintendent of Paris Schools. I want you to know I got your name through career placement. And we're looking for a business and office teacher to finish out the year for someone who has become sick.
Mm.
And we would see if you would like to be interested in coming over and interviewing with us tomorrow. And I said, yes, sir, I'll be right there. And it was about an hour from my home. And so I go over there, I meet with Mr. Chumley, I meet with Mr. Homer Goins, the principal, and I start to work in 3 days after that. And and so the next year I get hired back. Unfortunately, the lady Joy Armstrong, who I took her place, she had come down with cancer,
Mm.
and she did not make it. And so they hired me back, and then they hired me back as
That's
the
wild.
baseball coach. And so that started my journey. And Paula and I, to this day, her first job was at the YMCA there teaching kindergarten.
Mm.
And so, again, when we reflect back, and I'm a reflector, uh, you and I have visited today, and I'll go home and I'll reflect back to that, and I'll think
Mm.
about something I said, and maybe I'll say, "Boy, I wish I'd have said this," or "I wish
Yeah.
I'd have done that." I think we all do that if we're in the growth business
Yep.
and we want to grow as an individual and as a person. And so I think back to Paris and that start, and I thank God.
Well, one of the things I love about you, and I've gotten to listen to you on some other podcasts, you love learning. And one of the things you've done in your organization is you set up a process of learning for these athletic administrators to continue to develop. Why is it so critical that a leader never stop learning, that a leader never feel like they've arrived in whatever industry they might be in? Why is it so critical that they keep a heart to learn? And how have you done that?
Well, I think first of all, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So, um, I think for me, I've just seen the growth as me, not only a professional growth, but personal growth.
That's right.
And that's a daily charge. And I want to be a better man today than I was yesterday, a better servant for our members than I want to be better. But I think that it's a growth mindset that you have to embrace. And one of the things with our organization, with our association, we offer a curriculum, and that curriculum is to prepare those. And Mike, 2 minutes, one of the things, the issues we deal with right now is we have individuals get into our profession and they have grand visions of it being, you know, the glamour job. And when they realize that you are the last one there,
That's right.
you are responsible for this. When they realize all that, they're like, well, or when the first parent call comes in and they're like, I didn't sign up for this.
Yep.
And so at that point, I think what we provide and what we try to do is to prepare them for that journey. And through our curriculum, through our cohorts, through the opportunity to network with like-minded individuals, can take a young athletic administrator. And research shows that if we can get them to year 3 and year 4, then our chances are really good for them to staying in the profession. But what's happening, Mike, we get some good ones. And guess what happens? Superintendents at local school districts realize how good they are. And the next thing you know, they're a principal
Yep.
or they're doing something else within the district. And, you know, being an athletic administrator is it's a family commitment. And I'm so thankful for the fact that my kids grew up in the gym or on the
Yep.
field.
Yep.
And I often apologize to both of them and they'll say, oh, Dad, don't you dare. It was awesome. And I hope other athletic administrators, as they are raising their children, get to experience some of the things we did. My daughter was the best ticket taker I had. She was awesome. And she knew everybody. And so it was a family affair.
I
So
love that.
when you think about that mindset, we try to impress upon our athletic administrators how important a growth mindset is. And that's something we talk about. We don't hide from it. And if you want to grow, we're going to help provide opportunities for you to grow. But understand the growth part means that you're willing to, as I say, take yourself and turn yourself inside out and be open and honest and transparency. And transparency is saying, Mike, I don't know if I know how to do that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
mentoring is so important today.
That's good.
And we have to have good mentors. And when we find good mentors and we're able to align them with athletic administrators, you can see just the assurance that a young athletic administrator will have when they have the right mentor
Yep.
working with them and encouraging them.
That's phenomenal. I read a great quote. And I wanted to get your perspective on this. A leader is one who builds trust, bears pain, and brings hope. Without these three, there's no healthy, effective leadership. So you lead thousands, thousands. You said you have 15,000 members, correct? That
Yes,
you
sir.
guys help serve. How do you, on a daily basis, seek to build trust, bear pain, and bring hope to all those that you serve? How do you do that?
Well, it's interesting when you say, build trust. The most important thing in leadership is integrity, and people
Mm,
have to see you as you
that's
are.
good.
You have to be authentic. You have to be authentic about yourself. You have to be authentic about the others in which you're serving, and they have to see an authenticity in you that they embrace in the fact that you do care. The old adage and the comment we've all used, no one cares until they know how much you care.
Yep.
And when they know that you care and that you're in it, and that was the great thing about traveling, was not the fact that the executive director there, it was Phil Rison, a former athletic director, who's here to share with us and to
Mm,
show us that I've been there. And I tell them all the time, I know what you're dealing with. I can feel
yep.
your
Yep.
pain of your long hours, your pain of the fact that your family time, the pain of the fact that you're trying to run a budget on limited resources,
Mm,
the pain of the fact that that parents are so much more difficult nowadays. Goodness gracious, if I'd have went home and said something, I wouldn't dare go home and tell my father or mother anything that
yep.
I did wrong, because I knew what was going to happen.
Yep.
And my dad wouldn't be marching down to the school. And nowadays, a good friend of mine that I work with talks about nowadays, the path. When we talk about that path, we need to prepare them for the path. We don't need to, we don't need to direct them to the path.
That's right.
Prepare them and let them grow and experience. And then, when you talk about trust and you talk about authentic, and then it's funny you say that, and I'll mention this individual. And I had the privilege of serving on our board in 2010. And on that board, I sat beside a guy named Tommy Marshall
Mm,
from Georgia.
hmm.
And Mike, I got to be a part of it. That was a God thing. I'm just telling you. I was sitting, my seat was beside Tommy Marshall. And so he was on the board for 2 more years, and I was on the board. So I got to sit beside him for 2 years and drink from that fountain. And when Tommy left the board, he gave us all on the board as a parting gift. He gave us 4 letters that spell the word hope.
Mm,
And he shared with us as he was departing. On that board, he said, understand you're the hope.
wow.
Don't ever lose the hope. You're the hope that we continue to reach the young men and women through what we're doing in our occupation. And I have those 4 letters in my office. And I look up at my credenza every day, and right there they are. So hope is important. When we
Yep.
lose hope and we lose faith, then we become dejected, discouraged, and we're not the person that we were meant to be.
That's right. Boy, that's good. That is so good. I've heard you talk a lot about a leader's humility. How how does your faith play into the humility you pray that you lead with on a day-to-day basis? What would you say?
Mike, I want others to see in me the reflection,
Mm,
and that reflection is my who I serve. The we serve I serve an organization that we have members that have many different faiths and many different religions and beliefs. And at the end of the day, I want it to be about love. That doesn't mean I might disagree with someone and how they believe or whatever, but I am taught to love. I am taught, and I was taught by the greatest example, Jesus, to love those. And so with that, I want people, the authenticity in me, to understand that I don't have all the answers. I'm going to try to seek them to assist you and help you. But at the end of the day, being humble to me, or having a sense of humility, represents for me the individual that I serve
mm,
as my Lord
that's
and
good.
Savior.
What's a quote that you keep around your office? You seem probably like you're probably like me. I think there's probably some quotes floating around there. What's a quote that when you're in a trying time, you go, man, I go back to this quote or I go back to this verse? What would you say?
Don't worry about tomorrow. God's already there.
There you go, boy. Woo! Why is that hard to remember sometimes?
Because we want to get out in front of God,
Mm.
and we want to drive our race cars and drive our life and get out in front of Him, and instead of letting Him pave the way, and understanding that process that we talked about early, how important it is through us as we grow as individuals. If Mike, if I was sitting here today and told you that I'm the same man that I was when I started at Paris High School in 1985, then I think of all the wasted years.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful that there are so many people that have poured their influence out into me to share with me.
Mm. You know, it's funny. We both look back on our lives. We're close to the same age. We look back on our lives and we remember people's stories and the Tommy Marshalls that have gone before us that we've rubbed up against and they've made us better. Final question of the day. If I were out and I run into a athletic administrator, we were talking about a conference that I'll be at up in Minneapolis this summer, and there'll be some ADs up there. And I were to say, tell me about Phil Rison. Tell me what you know. I met him on Zoom. Tell me what you know about him. What do you pray has been the influence that you've had on their lives? What would you say they would share with me? What's your prayer they would share with me about you?
Mike, I would hope they would say that, first of all, Phil Rison, that man is fired up
Mm,
for athletic administrators and the job that we do. And he wants to make sure that we have the resources that we need and the tools in our tool chest in order to serve as he would say, the most precious commodity we serve are our students.
mm,
That's our future. And through the hiring process that our athletic directors, their direct impact is when they hire individuals that are working with them, that's the most important decision they're making. But I hope they would say he is fired up. He's fired up about the passion of athletic administration. But I tell you what, he's as honest and as trustworthy as there is. And, he has a strong faith in what he
mm.
believes in. I would hope they would say that. And I know my closest friends would say that. When you, the thing about it is in 2007, we were right at about 5,400 athletic administrators. And here it is to 2024, and we've grown
It's amazing.
to over 15,000, hopefully soon to be over 16,000. That doesn't happen by accident. There have been others before me that have built some fires that we all warm by. And I am so thankful for that.